Hey guys, tonight we step through the creaking wooden doors of a Qing Dynasty brothel, and, bad news, you're not here as a guest with a pouch of silver, you're here as property. The air is thick with incense that doesn't quite hide the mildew in the beams, or the faint rot of leftover food tossed into a corner. Your name has been scribbled into a ledger, and with that simple act you become a commodity, a boy meant to entertain, to smile, to obey. You probably won't survive this in one piece, but that's why we're only imagining, so, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'd also love for you to post your location and local time down in the comments. Because I always find it strangely soothing to see where everyone's listening from. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You trudge across the threshold, feet heavy, as though the act of stepping into this building has changed your weight forever. A man with a long beard and pale jade ring has just paid your family, or maybe kidnapped you from the docks, depending on which story you prefer to tell yourself. Either way, you've landed here. The Qing dynasty stretches from the 17th to the early 20th century, and by this period, the empire's bureaucracy is massive, its art flourishing, and its morality, let's say, uneven. Brothels are condemned on paper, but they thrive in practice. You're led down a narrow hallway where red lanterns sway. They cast the walls in a glow that might be called romantic if it weren't also a little eerie, like firelight bouncing across coffin lids. The floorboards creak as other boys glance at you, some curious, some jealous, some too tired to care. They've seen fresh meat before. The madam, face powdered and lips painted crimson, looks you over with the same attention she might give a bolt of silk. She pinches your arm, checks your teeth, makes a sound that could be approval or disappointment, you can't tell. Historians still argue whether boys like you were primarily bought for performance, for companionship, or for outright sexual service, but either way, there's no opt-out form. You're shown your new bed, a straw mat laid against the far wall, wedged between a coughing teenager and a boy who stares at the ceiling as though he can see stars through the beams. The air smells of damp straw, opium smoke drifting from a neighboring room, and the faint sweetness of candied fruit. Probably a rare treat for a favored boy, not for you. In these establishments, appearances mattered. You'd soon be dressed in silks far above your social station, but for now, you're barefoot, your clothes thin from travel. The irony of Qing brothels: boys in fine robes often had nothing to eat but rice gruel, and those red lanterns were cheaper than they looked. You hear faint music from the main room. A client is already being entertained, the sound of a stringed instrument, perhaps a pipa, accompanied by laughter that's just a little too loud. One of the older boys strums it with careful elegance, smiling so wide you wonder if his jaw hurts. He's not playing because he loves music. He's playing because this is survival. The madam rattles off a list of rules you'll soon memorize. No leaving without permission, no insulting the guests, no fighting with the others, unless she says it's allowed. Every mistake costs you, maybe a day without food, maybe an extra chore scrubbing chamber pots, maybe worse. You don't ask questions. There's a saying in Qing cities: under the lamps of the pleasure quarters, everything is for sale. You're now part of that everything. The irony? Officials who ban brothels by daylight are often the same men who sneak in at night, fanning themselves with painted silk fans as if that makes hypocrisy less sweaty. At some point you drift into the background noise, the coughs, the laughter, the scrape of dice across a lacquered table. You're not performing yet, not being trotted out for a patron's amusement, but you feel the inevitability pressing in. You know that the first time your name is called, you'll step forward like a puppet on strings, and yet, even in this suffocating environment, odd little details cling to memory. The madam's parrot, for example, perched above the door, shrieking out curses it picked up from drunk customers. Or the way the boys, when the madam wasn't listening, competed to see who could recite Tang Dynasty poems fastest, treating literature like a forbidden game. That's the strange contradiction. beauty and degradation swirling together in the same cramped space. You lay back on the straw mat that scratches through your thin shirt. The coughing boy mutters a warning, don't smile too much at the rich ones. They'll own you faster. His eyes glint with bitterness, like he's seen it all before. Sleep, if it comes, will be shallow. The lanterns burn all night. Shadows crawling over your face, reminding you that morning doesn't mean freedom, it just means another cycle. You stir awake on your straw mat, if it can be called waking at all, since you never quite slept, just drifted in and out of shallow dreams punctured by coughing, muttering, and the creak of footsteps overhead. The light that filters through the lattice window is weak, a pale ribbon of dawn, but it already exposes how cramped your sleeping quarters truly are. You count bodies without meaning to, 1, 2, 3, each curled up like bundled rags, sharing the same stifling air. The boys sleep pressed shoulder to shoulder, breaths tangling together, some still reeking faintly of cheap wine spilled by last night's customers. There's no privacy here. If you shift your leg to stretch, you'll bump into someone else. The straw mat beneath you pokes through your thin blanket, scratching your skin. Rats scurry somewhere in the beams above, and a faint drizzle leaks through the tiled roof, so an unlucky boy in the corner keeps waking with cold drops splashing onto his forehead. The room is low-ceilinged and windowless except for that single lattice slit. In theory, it's the quarters for rest, but it feels more like a storage closet for human merchandise. Historians still argue whether these conditions were deliberate to enforce obedience or simply the result of poverty, but either way, comfort was not the goal. You notice one boy clutching a small carved token in his sleep. Perhaps a good luck charm from home. Another mutters a mother's name over and over, lips trembling. No one has energy to comfort him anymore. The smell of incense from last night has faded, replaced by something harsher, the ammonia tang of chamber pots shoved into the corner. You wrinkle your nose and wonder if your lungs will ever get used to it. Spoiler, they won't. In the corner, the coughing boy hacks again, his chest rattling like a cracked drum. Tuberculosis was rampant in Qing cities, especially in cramped houses like this. A doctor? Forget it. A madam wouldn't waste money on medicine when fresh boys were easier to procure. So you learn early, don't get attached. The boy beside you today might be gone by spring. As daylight grows, the room stirs. The madam's footsteps clatter outside. She raps on the door with her fan, and everyone sits up instantly, even if their eyes are still sticky with exhaustion. You join the shuffle, pulling on the same thin robe you wore yesterday. The robe smells faintly of mildew, because laundry is rare, but at least it covers you. Breakfast arrives, or rather, doesn't. The house runner drops a wooden bowl of watery rice gruel in the middle of the room. Each boy takes a turn scooping, trying not to scrape too deeply at the bottom where the burnt bits cling. If you're lucky, you'll find a single pickled radish slice. More often, just gray broth that fills the stomach but offers no strength. Quirky tidbit, sometimes, to appear generous, a patron might donate leftover sweets or fruit, which the madam would distribute with a ceremony grander than a New Year's feast. While you eat, the older boys trade gossip. One claims a scholar client lost half his silver last night playing dice and tried to barter with a poetry recital instead. Another swears the governor's nephew was spotted sneaking into the house, though historians still debate whether such scandals were exaggerations invented by rivals. Either way, the stories are fuel, they keep morale afloat in this suffocating space. Once bowls are licked clean, the day's duties begin. Some boys are ordered to sweep floors and empty chamber pots. Others fetch water from a nearby well, lugging buckets with raw, rope-burned hands. You're given the task of tidying sleeping mats. The irony isn't lost on you, smoothing out straw beds that will be trampled again tonight. Still, you do it, because refusing means punishment. The madam peeks in again, her face pale under layers of powder, lips pursed in disapproval. She points with her fan at one boy whose robe is too wrinkled, another whose hair is uncombed. She doesn't bother scolding, you all know the look is enough. Her gaze lingers on you a moment too long, measuring. As though deciding what kind of product you'll become. You suppress the urge to look away. Later in the day, you're herded into the main hall briefly to help set up for evening clients. The hall is grand compared to your quarters, lacquered screens, red lanterns, cushions embroidered with phoenixes. But up close, the glamour frays. The lacquer is chipped, the lantern silk patched with mismatched fabric, the embroidery worn thin. It's a place built to impress outsiders, not to comfort insiders. You return to the quarters by midday, already drowsy despite the light. The air is heavy, unmoving. Some boys collapse back onto their mats, trying to steal moments of rest before night duties. Others hum softly, scraps of songs taught to them by older performers. You close your eyes, but your mind won't settle. You keep thinking about the door, the heavy wooden one at the end of the hall, and how easily it could swing open to change your fate again. For now, though, it doesn't. You lie back, count the faint cracks in the ceiling, and accept the truth: this cramped sleeping quarter is not a temporary inconvenience. It's your world now. The afternoon haze settles over the brothel like a heavy shawl, and before you've even shaken off the weariness of morning chores, you're summoned for your next lesson. It turns out survival here isn't just about enduring hunger or learning how to fold straw mats neatly, it's about performance. And performance, in the Qing brothel world, means training in charm. You're ushered into a side room lined with cracked mirrors, lacquered screens, and the faint musk of incense sticks burned long ago. A few older boys lounge in the corner, lazily reciting verses of Tang poetry as if they were chanting spells. The madam sweeps in, fanning herself, her gaze sharp enough to slice through excuses. She's ready to mold you into a creature of allure. Not a scholar, not a servant, something in between, the peculiar hybrid of courtesan, actor, and pet. First lesson: posture. She taps your shoulders with the edge of her fan until you stand straighter, your back aching but your silhouette pleasing. She reminds you that clients are not merely looking for company, they're paying for an illusion. Even the way you lean against a pillar must suggest grace. Historians still argue whether this training was directly borrowed from theater troupes or whether brothels developed their own distinct etiquette, but either way, you're treated like a performer about to step on stage. Then comes speech. Your accent is too provincial, too rough, so she drills you on tones, forcing you to repeat lines of poetry until your tongue stumbles less. A client must believe you're educated, she says, even if you don't know a word of the classics. The older boys snicker quietly when you mispronounce a line. You flush, but you keep repeating, because defiance earns punishment, not applause. Music is next. A pipa rests in the corner, its strings slightly frayed. You're handed the instrument as though it were a test of your worth. Your fingers fumble, plucking unevenly. One of the senior boys demonstrates with practiced ease, his notes cascading like water over stones. You realize you'll need months before you can fake that level of elegance, but here, appearances are everything. The madam moves you to another exercise: laughter. Yes, laughter. She orders you to chuckle on cue, to let it roll from your throat like the sound of silver coins clinking together. Forced laughter feels ridiculous, like choking on air, but you learn quickly that clients will pay extra just to feel clever in your company. She tells you, the laugh is the bait, the silence is the hook. You don't quite understand, but you nod anyway. There's a quirky tidbit here: some brothels in the Qing period were rumored to keep books filled with jokes, witty one-liners, and amusing riddles for their boys to memorize. Imagine flipping through a manual of canned charm, practicing quips like school lessons. You suspect the madam has her own mental book of such tricks, which she drip-feeds to you when she thinks you're ready. Of course, this training isn't just skill, it's also humiliation. The older boys enjoy pointing out your mistakes, smirking when your poetry comes out crooked or your bow looks more like a farmer stooping to weed a field. Rivalries sharpen through this process. The more polished you become, the more competition you pose. You notice, too, that training often doubles as surveillance. The madam keeps a close eye not only on your progress but also on your spirit. If you look too rebellious, she clamps down harder. If you look broken, she tries to prop you up just enough to remain useful. It's a delicate balance, one you're forced to walk daily. By evening, you're exhausted from rehearsing bows, memorizing lines, and repeating scales until your fingertips burn. You slump back into the quarters, where the boys whisper their own complaints. One swears he was forced to sing the same verse 50 times, another claims he had to practice smiling until his cheeks went numb. It's absurd, but it's also survival. You can't afford to be the dull one in a house built on illusions, and yet, a strange thing happens. Amid the monotony of training, you begin to glimpse the smallest flickers of beauty. The cadence of a poem sticks in your head, like a lullaby for the weary. The notes of the pipa, though clumsy under your fingers, sometimes align into something almost sweet. Even your laughter, fake as it is, occasionally makes someone else giggle for real, which feels like a secret victory, but you don't fool yourself. These lessons aren't designed for your joy. They're shackles wrapped in silk. You're being taught to charm strangers, to wear a mask so convincing that it eventually fuses to your face. You lie down that night on your straw mat, sore from hours of forced refinement, and realize that in this place, even your smile doesn't belong to you anymore. By the time the next morning arrives, you've learned that glamour in the brothel is mostly smoke and mirrors. You shuffle into the dressing area, where a row of silk robes hangs like trophies, glistening faintly in the lantern light. The colors are breathtaking: crimson, jade, indigo, all stitched with golden thread into dragons, phoenixes, or swirling clouds. They look like something a young prince might wear on stage, but when you touch the fabric, reality peeks through. The robes are stiff from overuse, patched in hidden places where the embroidery has frayed, and the dye sometimes rubs off on your skin, leaving faint streaks of color. They are not gifts, not treasures, they're costumes. Designed to disguise your emptiness. You slip into one anyway, because appearance is everything. In the mirror, you almost look like someone wealthy, someone free. Almost, then comes the reality check, your stomach growls. Breakfast today is the same bowl of rice gruel, thin as yesterday's broth. One pickled radish slice has been dropped into the pot for flavor. You chew it slowly, trying to convince yourself it's a feast. A few of the older boys trade jokes, calling the radish slice the emperor's jewel, but the humor only dulls the hunger a little. This paradox, fine silks with empty bellies, was common in Qing brothels. Historians still argue whether the meager rations were intentional punishment, or simply because madams skimmed most of the food money for profit. Either way, you wear a robe worth more than a farmer earns in a year, while eating a meal worth less than a farmer's chicken feed. Once dressed, the madam parades you and a few others into the front hall. Patrons haven't arrived yet, but she wants to inspect the effect. She circles you slowly, tapping her fan against her palm. "The robe hides your thinness," she says, satisfied. You realize, bitterly, that hunger itself has become part of the performance. The front hall looks deceptively lush: silk curtains, painted scrolls of mountain landscapes, and low tables polished to a mirror sheen. But the corners betray the truth: candle wax dripped on rugs, cushions worn thin, lacquer chipped by careless hands. The silk disguises a wooden skeleton just as your robe disguises your ribs. There's a quirky tidbit about those scrolls: sometimes they weren't even genuine. Reproductions of famous landscapes or calligraphy were churned out cheaply for brothels, because true art was too expensive to risk around drunk customers. Imagine reciting a famous poem under a masterpiece painting that was really mass-produced knockoff. Your performance had to distract the patron enough that he never noticed. By midday, your stomach is already empty again. Hunger gnaws at your thoughts even during practice drills. A boy beside you whispers that he sometimes sneaks rice husks from the kitchen trash. Another swears he once caught a rat, cooked it secretly, and declared it roast pheasant. You don't know if he's joking, and you're not sure you want to. In the evening, patrons begin to arrive. The madam lines you all up, robes gleaming, hair neatly tied. She smiles with the pride of a shopkeeper showing off fine wares. You notice one patron's eyes light up at the sight of embroidered dragons, clearly more impressed by cloth than flesh. Another strokes the silk sleeve of the boy next to you, murmuring how refined it looks, though the boy himself looks exhausted. You realize, with a sting of irony, that half your job isn't entertaining, it's selling the illusion that your life is luxurious. Patrons sip their warm wine and assume you're pampered, well-fed, content to laugh at their jokes. They never see the empty bowls, the nights when your belly cramps so badly you can't sleep. Still, you play the part. You bow, you smile, you let the silk ripple when you move as though you're floating rather than trudging. And somewhere in that performance, you almost trick yourself into believing the glamour. Almost, later, when the patrons finally leave, you return to your quarters, peel off the robe, and fold it carefully so the madam won't scold you. Beneath the silk, your ribs jut like a cage. The disguise has vanished, and what remains is the hunger gnawing once again. You curl on your mat, clutching your stomach, and fall into shallow sleep. The evening begins with the faint clatter of sandals on the polished wood floors, followed by the unmistakable rustle of silk sleeves. Clients have arrived, and tonight you are called to the front. Your heart knocks against your ribs, but you've already learned that the only acceptable rhythm is poise. So you smooth your robe, force a smile, and step into the smoky glow of lantern light. The patrons are wealthy merchants, their bellies straining against embroidered belts. They've just returned from the docks, where shipments of tea and porcelain have been offloaded, and their hands smell faintly of coins and salt air. Their expectations are clear, they want not only wine, but amusement, cleverness, and the illusion of intimacy. One beckons you forward. You kneel gracefully, just as you've practiced, and pour his cup of warmed rice wine without spilling a drop. He rewards you with a smirk, as though you've passed a test you didn't sign up for. Soon, he demands you play a game of loo bo, a traditional board game with dice and sticks, once favored by aristocrats. You don't know the rules well, but you pretend confidence. He seems to enjoy correcting you, laughing every time you make a blunder. That laughter, you realize, is worth more to him than victory. Another patron asks you to recite poetry. Luckily, the madam's drills come to your rescue. You murmur verses of Li Bai. Careful with your tones, letting your voice flow like water across stones. The man claps in delight, convinced you are cultured beyond your years. Historians still argue whether brothel boys were truly literate or simply memorized a stock repertoire of poems, but in this moment, the illusion is all that matters. Soon the requests grow stranger. One merchant insists you compose a riddle on the spot, then chuckles heartily even when your attempt makes no sense. Another demands you pour his drink while balancing the wine jug on your elbow, an acrobatic trick that nearly drenches the table. Yet he roars with delight, pounding the lacquered wood until the cups rattle. You catch glimpses of the other boys, each performing their own version of charm. One strums the pipa with feigned passion, his fingers aching. Another sings a ballad so sweet it nearly masks the tremor in his voice. Across the room, a boy delivers endless witty anecdotes about local officials, some probably fabricated, but the clients don't care. They laugh, slap their thighs, and order another round. There's a quirky tidbit here. Some brothels actually kept joke books and riddle scrolls behind screens, so the boys could sneak glances between performances. If a patron thought you were clever, half the time you were just repeating lines scribbled by some long-gone wit. You imagine your madam has such a stash, though she guards it like state secrets. As the wine flows, the demands intensify. Patrons want you to laugh at their jokes, even the ones that fall flat. They want you to gasp in awe at their tales of trading triumphs, whether or not you understand a word. They want you to lean in close, eyes wide, as though their every word is a pearl. Your stomach clenches, not from hunger this time, but from exhaustion. The mask of charm is heavy. But you remind yourself, resistance isn't an option. You play along, nodding, clapping, offering sly remarks when needed. One slip, and the madam's fan will tap your shoulder with icy precision, reminding you that your survival depends on your performance, and sometimes, unexpectedly, a strange kind of pride creeps in. You notice how the patrons compete for your attention, how their eyes brighten when you speak. For a fleeting moment, you wield power, not real power, but the illusion of it, spun from silk and words. It's dangerous to savor, but impossible to ignore, hours later, when the last cup is drained and the last riddle told. The patrons stagger away, their laughter echoing down the street. The hall grows quiet again. You slip back into the shadows, shoulders aching, cheeks sore from smiling. Back in your quarters, you collapse onto your mat. The coughing boy beside you mutters, "You lasted." Not bad. You wonder if that's praise or warning. Either way, you know tomorrow will bring the same routine: wine, games, poetry, laughter on command. Clients' demands are endless, but so is your role as their mirror, their puppet, their entertainment. You close your eyes, the echo of forced laughter still buzzing in your ears, and drift into uneasy sleep. The lanterns have burned low by the time you stagger back to the quarters, but the night doesn't end when the patrons leave. Here, the game of survival shifts inward, because brothel boys are not only competitors for clients' attention, they're rivals in a hierarchy as sharp as a knife. You notice it right away. The older boys, the ones favored by wealthy merchants, lounge smugly near the better spots by the wall where leaks don't drip. Their silk robes are newer, their portions of rice sometimes mysteriously larger. Meanwhile, newcomers like you are shoved to the edges, where mats are damp and the draft creeps in at night. In this place, rank isn't written down, but everyone knows it. One boy, narrow-eyed and sly, sidles up to you. He whispers a warning: "Don't outshine me when the patrons ask for poetry." You nod quickly, though you don't intend to obey. Already, you've learned that jealousy is as common here as coughs. A patron's glance, a compliment, even a laugh shared too long, all of these can spark rivalries. The hierarchy is reinforced not by rules, but by whispers. Boys trade secrets like currency: who stumbled during a song, who angered a client, who sneaked an extra bite of food. Spread the right rumor, and you might rise a step, fall victim to one, and you could sink fast. Historians still argue whether these rivalries were deliberately fostered by madams to keep boys divided. But the evidence suggests that nothing kept order like envy. Sometimes the competition is almost theatrical. Two boys will duel in riddles during a gathering, each trying to win louder laughter, each pretending to be gracious while secretly seething. Other times it's crueler, with sabotage as subtle as loosening the string of a rival's pipa before a performance. You learn quickly to watch your belongings, even if all you own is a comb and a robe patched twice over. A quirky tidbit: in some records, brothel boys were said to keep pet crickets, betting on their fights for amusement. In this microcosm of survival, even the crickets became metaphors, tiny warriors locked in a battle for dominance, just like their owners. You imagine their chirps echoing through the quarters, masking jealous whispers. The madam encourages competition with a sly hand. She praises one boy loudly, making others bristle, then scolds another just enough to humiliate him. It's a balancing act, designed to keep everyone desperate for approval. And approval equals clients, and clients equal survival. You experienced this firsthand one evening when a patron, tipsy on plum wine, singles you out. He praises your recitation of a verse, calling you a clever little sparrow. The words warm you for a heartbeat, but then you notice the narrow-eyed boy glaring, his lips thin with fury. Later, your robe goes missing, only to be found shoved behind a water jar, soaked and filthy. A warning. You wear it anyway, shivering, because options are limited. At times, the hierarchies blur into fleeting alliances. You find yourself whispering secrets with the coughing boy, sharing scraps of gossip in exchange for protection. But even alliances are fragile. He warns you never to trust anyone fully, not even him. You nod, because you already know. Still, a strange rhythm emerges. You learn who controls which corner of the room, who gets first pick at the gruel pot, who will trip you if you reach too quickly for an extra spoonful. You learn to bow at the right moment, to laugh at the right joke, to step aside when the madam's favorite walks by. It's not just survival, it's choreography. And you dance it daily, because missteps have consequences. At night, lying back on your mat, you listen to the creaks of the old beams and the soft breathing of rivals turned roommates. The air is thick with unsaid things. You wonder how long before you rise, or fall, in this silent war of jealousies. And you realize that in a house built on illusion, even your friends might be your enemies tomorrow. The months drift on, and you find yourself becoming fluent in the strange dialect of survival that rules this brothel. The hierarchy, once baffling, is now a game you know how to play, though never quite to master. You begin to sense the unspoken codes, the ways boys signal alliances with nothing more than a shared glance, or declare war by ignoring one another in silence, and yet, even as you learn to navigate rivals, there is another realm you must enter, the world of the patrons. For while the boys jostle and hiss like alley cats, it is the visitors, merchants, scholars, minor officials, who shape your nights, and sometimes your fate. When a patron enters, the room shifts. It is as though the very air changes texture. Heavier with expectation. Every boy watches keenly, weighing the gait, the clothing, the smell of perfume or dust, trying to guess whether this man is generous or miserly, kind or cruel. You learn quickly that appearances deceive. A merchant in threadbare robes may bring a heavy purse, a scholar with polished manners may hide a cruel hand. The performances are elaborate but never genuine. You and the others laugh too easily, nod too often, feign admiration for verses you have heard dozens of times. A patron might recite a clumsy couplet about the moon, and you are expected to sigh as though hearing brilliance. This false admiration becomes second nature, until you sometimes forget what real laughter feels like. Yet there are peculiarities, little quirks in the patron's desires that stick in memory. One insists on being called general, though he is only a rice merchant. Another likes to test boys with riddles, rewarding a clever answer with an extra copper coin. Still another demands silence, wanting only to sit in a haze of incense while someone combs his hair. These details, strange as they are, form the rhythms of your nights. Historians note that patrons sought brothel boys not only for pleasure, but also for the performance of companionship. Many longed for admiration more than touch. To be adored, even artificially, was a rare indulgence in a society where men bore the weight of public reputation. The boys, in turn, became masters of providing that illusion, crafting affection like a potter shaping clay. You find yourself caught in this performance, your voice softening at the right moments, your eyes widening in rehearsed wonder. You become skilled at listening, though often the stories are dull, tales of failed business ventures or petty bureaucratic squabbles. Still, you nod and murmur as though each word were precious. Some patrons linger, returning often enough that you begin to remember their rhythms. There is the minor official who always smells faintly of ink and asks you to sing the same mournful ballad. There is the widowed scholar who grows maudlin after 2 cups of wine, speaking of the wife he lost as though her shadow sits at the table. These familiarities, strange as they are, lend a kind of stability to your otherwise shifting existence, but patrons also bring dangers. A cruel one may pinch too hard, leaving bruises hidden beneath your robe. A drunken one may stumble into violence, demanding more than you are ready to give. And always, there is the threat of favoritism, because if one boy is chosen too often, others bristle with resentment. You feel those resentful glances more keenly than any bruise. There are also whispers that some patrons keep boys beyond the brothel, taking them as private companions. This is spoken of with envy and dread. Envy, because such an arrangement means better food, softer beds, perhaps even gifts of clothing or coins. Dread, because it also means isolation, dependence on a single man's whims, and the risk of being cast aside when novelty fades. You listen to these stories with unease, never sure whether to hope for such a fate or fear it. Curiously, a few patrons seek not affection but entertainment. They ask boys to perform comic skits, or to mimic the voices of officials, or to tell long rambling tales. You once imitated the nasal whine of a city crier so perfectly that even the stern madam laughed. For that night at least, laughter shielded you from rivalries. The patrons are a parade of human oddities, lonely men, cruel men, generous men, forgettable men, and through it all you learn to keep your face a mask. Behind that mask, however, you sense the slow erosion of self. The more you pretend, the less you remember what is real, and yet, sometimes, just sometimes, a glance lingers too long, or a word is spoken with unexpected kindness. These rare moments, fleeting as they are, remind you that beneath the layers of performance, you are still human. Still capable of feeling. Still clinging, stubbornly, to the idea that somewhere beyond these rooms, there is a life not ruled by coin. Rivalry, an illusion. The coughing starts before dawn. It rattles through the dormitory like a chorus of broken bells, one boy gasping, another hacking, until the whole room feels heavy with illness. You lie awake, staring at the ceiling beams, wondering which cough belongs to which body, and how many more mornings it will take before you add your own voice to the chorus. Disease is not an intruder here, it is a housemate. The air itself feels damp with contagion, carrying whispers of phlegm, the sweet sour tang of fever sweat, the faint sting of stale urine that never seems to wash from the mats. Even when incense coils burn thick in the corners, their smoke cannot disguise the truth. This house is a breeding ground. You hear stories from outside, too. Smallpox sweeping through neighborhoods, cholera carried by bad water, opium addicts shriveling into husks before your eyes. Inside, the threats are closer, lice marching through your hair, scabies burrowing under the skin, endless coughing fits that mark the start of something worse. Historians still argue whether venereal diseases spread as rampantly among brothel boys as among courtesans, but the fear is there all the same. A rash, a sore, even a fever might spell the end of your usefulness, and therefore your worth. The madam does not waste money on doctors. Instead, she trusts in poultices brewed from questionable herbs, or powders sprinkled across sores with the same flourish one might use to dust sugar over cakes. Some boys swear by garlic cloves tied around the neck, others by charms purchased from a temple stall. You try them all, half believing, because belief is all you have. Quirky remedies circulate constantly. Someone once claimed crocodile bile, imported from the far south, could cure almost anything. For weeks, the dormitory reeked of strange, bitter concoctions. Another fad involved swallowing mercury pills, a treatment that shimmered with promise but left boys vomiting silver-flecked bile. You joke that the only thing mercury cures is your appetite. The older boys laugh, thin, wheezy laughter that quickly dissolves into coughing fits. Illness means punishment as well as suffering. If you are too weak to work, the madam deducts from your share of meals. If you collapse, you may be locked away until you recover, or until you don't. There is no sick leave here, no gentle hand to press your brow. You are expected to smile even when your throat burns and your body aches. The fear seeps into you. At night, you dream of bodies laid out in the courtyard, shrouded hastily in coarse cloth. Sometimes the dreams are memories, sometimes premonitions. You recall the boy who slept 3 mats down from you. Gone one morning, his belongings vanished, as though he had never existed. The others whisper that he was carried out in the dead of night, too far gone to recover. You never learned his name, now you will never know it. Still, camaraderie sparks amid the sickness. When one boy is burning with fever, another might place a cool rag on his head, or sneak an extra spoonful of rice gruel. Small kindnesses grow like weeds in cracked stone, surprising you with their resilience. You learn that even in filth and fear, human tenderness finds ways to survive. From beyond the brothel's walls, rumors of medical advances filter in. Foreign doctors in the treaty ports experiment with vaccines. Strange practices involving needles and cowpox. Some say they work, others insist it is dangerous sorcery. You imagine what it would feel like to be protected from sickness, to wake without dread of the next cough. That dream feels as remote as the stars you glimpse through broken shutters. The irony is sharp, patrons worry about disease too. They bring talismans, or demand incense so thick it chokes you, convinced the smoke will purify the air. Some even lecture about morality, claiming illness is heaven's punishment for vice, even as they sit there demanding your company. You learn to nod at their wisdom, all while suppressing the urge to cough in their faces. There are debates still, were brothel boys more vulnerable to epidemics than ordinary city dwellers, or did their close quarters merely make suffering more visible? Historians can't agree. You know only what you live. That illness is not an abstract question but a shadow draped over every day, a weight pressing on your chest even when you feel well. And yet, somehow, you continue. You drink your bitter teas, tie garlic around your neck, scrub your body with cold water when you can steal a moment. You pretend that each deep breath you manage is proof that you have won another day. You joke, sometimes, with the others, we're not dying yet, so the madam will still want us. Humor, thin as it is, keeps the despair from swallowing you whole. Every night, you lie on your mat listening to coughs echo like drums of doom. And every morning, you wake surprised to find yourself still breathing. That surprise, however small, feels like defiance. You may not control your body, your fate, or the air you breathe, but for now, you endure. And endurance, in this house, is the closest thing you have to victory. The coughing never truly stops, but sometimes, amid the hacking and wheezing, there are softer sounds, laughter, whispered secrets, even the occasional hum of a lullaby. For all the cruelty of the brothel, the rivalries and sickness, you find that friendships grow here, as unlikely as flowers sprouting between cracks in stone. It begins with small gestures. A boy slipping you an extra mouthful of rice when you are too weak to fetch your own. Another sharing a scrap of fabric so you can patch the hole in your robe. At first, you mistrust these acts, wondering what hidden cost might follow. But slowly, you learn that survival in such a place sometimes depends less on cunning and more on quiet solidarity. Friendships among brothel boys are complex, shaded with both warmth and danger. The madam discourages strong bonds, fearing conspiracies or escape attempts. She prefers to pit you against one another, dangling favors to keep you suspicious. But no amount of manipulation can entirely stamp out the human need for connection. When you lie shoulder to shoulder every night, when you share the same humiliations, rivalries soften into something more tender. Historians still argue whether these bonds were purely pragmatic or carried genuine affection. Letters and poems left behind hint at both. Some speak of sworn brotherhood sealed with vows under moonlight. Others describe fleeting kindnesses that flickered and died as soon as a patron's coin dictated new loyalties. In your world, it is both, survival strategy and emotional necessity, tangled so tightly they are impossible to separate. There is one boy, perhaps, who becomes more than the others. He sits near you during meals, tells stories that make the coughing room momentarily feel like a teahouse stage. He knows how to mimic the pompous tones of patrons so perfectly that you laugh until your ribs ache. And when the laughter fades, he sits quietly, just close enough that his presence steadies you. No contract binds this companionship, no money buys it. It exists in the hidden spaces between performance and exhaustion. Quirky traditions emerge from these friendships. One boy teaches you to fold scraps of paper into tiny boats, floating them in a basin of water and whispering wishes as they drift. Another swears by a superstition that if two boys share the same pillow for 3 nights, their dreams will merge, and fortune will favor them. You try it once, and though your dreams are as muddled as ever, you keep the memory as something sacred. Even humor, thin and wheezy, becomes a lifeline. You joke about the patrons, inventing silly nicknames: the rice rat, the moon poet, the general without an army. The madam would beat you if she knew, but laughter behind closed doors is its own rebellion. Each joke is a reminder that you are not merely props in a theater of desire, you are still people, capable of mocking the absurdity of those who claim power over you, but friendships are fragile here. The same boy who comforts you may also compete for the favor of a wealthy client. Envy creeps in, uninvited, corroding trust. You watch as two close companions grow distant when one is chosen night after night, his new silken robes gleaming brighter than the bond they once shared. It hurts, because you know it could happen to you, or you might be the cause. Some friendships endure longer. You hear stories of pairs who ran away together, vanishing into the night like shadows. No one knows if they found freedom or simply disappeared into another brothel in another city. You cling to these stories anyway, because hope is contagious, just like disease. Scholars have debated whether these bonds among boys carried echoes of brotherhood societies in wider Qing society, secret associations of artisans, soldiers, or rebels who swore loyalty against all odds. Maybe the brothel is a miniature version of that, an underworld where alliances, however small, become acts of quiet resistance. You feel it most on the nights when a patron is cruel, leaving you shaken. Afterwards, one of the boys slips beside you, saying nothing, just pressing his hand briefly against yours before turning away. The touch lasts only a moment, but in that silence you find strength. You learn that care does not always need words. The irony is that in a house built on false performances, the only truth you can trust is found in these small, hidden friendships. They are fragile, yes, but they are real. They remind you that you are more than a costume, more than a body rented by the hour. You are still someone who can laugh, who can be comforted, who can, against all odds, feel loved, and so, night after night, even when coughs echo like drums of doom, you cling to those fleeting bonds. They cannot save you from the brothel's rules, or from the patrons, or from the creeping illnesses. But they save you from forgetting who you are. And that, in this place, is everything. The dreams of escape start quietly, creeping into your thoughts like a draft through a cracked window. At first, it is only a fleeting idea. You imagine walking beyond the brothel's painted doors, breathing the crisp night air, and never turning back. But the longer you endure the routines of charm, rivalry, and sickness, the more these fantasies grow. You picture yourself running through the lanes of Beijing or Nanjing, past dumpling stalls and shadowed courtyards. Maybe you'd cut your hair, disguise yourself as an apprentice, and vanish into the crowds. Or you'd slip onto a riverboat, drifting down the Yangtze to a town where no one knows your name. In dreams, escape is always clean. Almost cinematic. Reality is different. The brothel has eyes everywhere. The madam stations guards and older boys at the gates. Debts are recorded carefully. Even if you slipped away, you'd be branded a debtor, hunted by the same networks that supply new boys. Those caught are dragged back, paraded in shame, beaten until their screams echo through the rafters. You've heard them. Sometimes you still hear them long after the beatings end. Historians argue whether escape was possible or mostly myth. Hopeful stories passed between mats. Some records suggest boys vanished into port cities, hidden by foreign ships. Others say these tales were exaggerations, contraband morale. Either way, the longing burns real in your chest. At times, opportunity feels close. During festivals, lanterns and music fill the streets, and you imagine blending into the crowd. Or during a fire drill, smoke and panic could cover your flight. You rehearse these scenarios so often they feel almost real. Some boys speak openly. One swears of monks sheltering runaways, another of a cousin in Canton with work in a tea shop. You want to believe, but the stories shift each time. Tricks surface too. One boy smeared ash on his face, pretending smallpox, hoping for release. Instead, he was locked in storage for a week, emerging pale, his will to escape gone. Another prayed to the kitchen god each new year, leaving candy in the stove's ashes. Whether heaven listened, no one knows, and yet, the dream persists. Even beatings cannot kill it. On quiet nights, you stare at the stars through broken shutters, telling yourself they are maps guiding you to freedom. You don't know if you'll ever follow them, but imagining is enough to carry you through another day. The contradiction gnaws at you, you long for escape but fear it too. The brothel is a prison, but one you understand. Beyond lies the unknown, hunger, betrayal, worse traps. Perhaps that is why most boys never leap. Still, the fantasies sustain you. They keep a spark alive, a refusal to surrender. You whisper that one day you'll walk free, even if you don't know how. That whisper becomes a secret prayer, carried in every bow, every forced laugh, every weary step, because even here, hope remains your most dangerous, and most necessary, contraband. The irony never escapes you, the same officials who rail against vice by day slip through the brothel doors at night. Magistrates proclaim that brothels corrupt the Confucian order, yet after dark they sit in lacquered chairs, sipping rice wine while boys like you fan them or recite poetry. Hypocrisy lingers in the air as thick as incense smoke. You overhear their half-drunken lectures about family harmony and public morality. They wag their fingers as if in court, while the other hand rests lazily on your shoulder. The contradiction would be comical if it weren't so exhausting. You nod at the right moments, murmur assent, and resist laughing when one stumbles out, silk slippers dragging across the dusty floor. Historians still debate whether Qing officials truly feared moral decline or merely staged outrage while indulging in secret. To you, living the contradiction, the debate feels quaint, the hypocrisy shapes the city itself. During festivals, officials order raids, soldiers storm brothels, madams are paraded in chains. Streets fall silent for weeks, until business resumes, often with the same officials returning as patrons, chuckling that order has been restored. You wonder what kind of order requires both shackles and silken robes. Some patrons turn this duplicity into ritual. One magistrate demanded you recite the classic of filial piety before he'd sip his wine, others ask for Confucius quotes as they drink. You comply, though you imagine the sage rolling his eyes. The madam is pragmatic. She warns you never to speak of patrons, for silence protects both her business and your survival. To betray a hypocrite would invite disaster, and disaster always falls first on the powerless. Still, opportunities appear. Some officials pose as poets and demand critiques, others rehearse speeches, using boys as rapt audiences. You reflect their self-importance back at them like a mirror. It is performance art of a sort, but the applause is bought, not earned. The cycle becomes predictable as the seasons: condemn, indulge, condemn again. You suspect it will never end, because it serves both rulers and ruled to pretend outrage by day and seek comfort by night. Sometimes you imagine keeping a secret journal of every hypocrite, every speech and stumble recorded. But who would read it? Who would believe it? Hypocrisy is too useful to dismantle. It smooths contradictions, shields reputations, keeps the machinery running, so you swallow your laughter, bow your head, recite, pour, and smile. When the officials slip away before dawn, reputations intact, you clean the cups and fold away the costumes of morality, and you realize the brothel is not so different from the empire itself. Both thrive on pretense, rely on silence, and expect the powerless to keep performing, no matter how absurd the stage becomes. The hypocrisy of officials fades into another layer of the brothel's nightly theater, the world of literati and performers. If bureaucrats come cloaked in contradictions, the poets and actors arrive wrapped in silks of self-importance. They bring scrolls, instruments, masks, and the heady air of theater stages. Their visits are more playful, more eccentric, but no less demanding. These men care less about secrecy and more about spectacle. A scholar might insist you sit cross-legged while he declaims Li Bai, pausing for you to gasp at his talent. Another demands improvised couplets, clapping when you manage even a clever pun. You are not only a boy for hire here, but also a prop in their art. A mirror for their vanity, historians note that Qing brothels often blurred into the theater world. Male actors, especially those playing female roles, mingled easily with brothel boys. Patrons often pretended to confuse art with intimacy. Some argue it was mere transaction, others that genuine collaborations emerged. Perhaps both. For you, it means nights filled with song and recitation. The literati demand you learn opera arias, correcting posture and gestures until you feel more puppet than person. Yet sometimes, when verse and song align, you too forget it is performance for hire. Certain quirks linger. One actor arrives in full costume, refusing to remove his mask until dawn. Another has you play zither while he dances barefoot, scattering flower petals. You laugh quietly, but comply, because compliance is your trade. Wine flows differently with these patrons. Where merchants count coins, poets demand endless toasts, declaring wine the river of inspiration. Soon the room is thick with slurred verses and unfinished rhymes. You pour cup after cup, pretending to drink watered wine to stay standing. Actors are more theatrical still, casting you in impromptu skits, a maid, a general, even a ghost. The boys laugh, and for once the laughter feels almost real. These small bursts of play break the monotony, even if they serve others' whims, but beneath the frivolity lies a darker truth. Their praise fades with dawn, leaving only empty cups and sandalwood scent. Applause is fleeting. You begin to wonder if your existence is itself just another performance, staged until the curtain falls. Still, you learn from them. Verses that win sighs, gestures that charm. These tools become armor. If the brothel is a stage, you are mastering its script. Some nights, when lanterns dim and scholars snore, you whisper fragments of poetry to yourself, not as performance, but as private solace. Words remind you that language can still belong to you, and so the world of literati folds into your nightly existence, leaving exhaustion and scraps of beauty. In a house of masks and pretense, perhaps it is fitting that the actors feel most at home. And perhaps, without meaning to, they teach you that even in a life not chosen, you can play your role with a kind of artistry. Winter arrives with quiet cruelty. Lanterns flicker against frost-coated windows, wooden floors groan under creeping ice. Your robe, once vibrant, feels threadbare, and rice gruel has thinned further as the madam saves fuel for patrons' wine. Hunger gnaws even during performances, the cold sharpens everything, coughs, rivalries, fatigue. Boys huddle together for warmth, arms wrapping in gestures half fraternal, half pragmatic. You learn to sleep with one eye open, guarding against older boys claiming the warmest mat or the madam's sudden inspections. Each breath steams in the air, a reminder of life's fragility. Winter also brings unusual visitors. Traveling merchants arrive with furs and exotic goods, eager to flaunt wealth. One produces a snow globe, asking you to describe a storm in faraway lands. You comply, imagining snowflakes falling softly on your mat instead of frozen boards, a fleeting glimpse of wonder. Historians debate whether brothel boys fared better than other laborers in winter. Indoors may have sheltered from winds, but close quarters bred disease. You know only the sensation, cold in your bones, hunger tightening, mortality hovering in whispered conversations. Small rituals distract the boys. One sketches dragons in frost, another makes paper lanterns to float in water. These amusements offer slivers of hope, reminders that even in despair, creativity persists. Patrons react differently. Some order extra blankets, feigning tenderness. Others, drunk on plum wine, demand you dance as though the chill cannot touch you. You comply, toes aching but smile fixed, because survival demands it. Hierarchy stiffens. Older boys monopolize warmth and food, while newcomers endure frostbitten fingers. Yet alliances persist, shared bites, quiet encouragement, small trades. Cold breeds both rivalry and camaraderie. Illness worsens. Coughs echo, fevers spike, boys vanish under blankets in the night, their absence marked only by murmurs. Each loss reminds you of the house's precarious balance: live, perform, survive, or be swept aside. Still, you find small victories, learning a new verse, securing a thicker mat, offering an extra performance. These tiny triumphs mark endurance, proof of agency. However constrained, winter, you realize, is a teacher. It exposes weakness, forces ingenuity, deepens bonds. In its crystalline lessons, you discover resilience, the strength to endure not only the madam's whims and patron's fancies, but even the bitter cold creeping into every corner of your life. Spring arrives slowly, carrying the smell of wet earth and the first shy green of willow shoots. The frost retreats, but the brothel's routines do not. Patrons return with lighter steps, spending more freely. The boys, including you, shed layers of wool while adding new tricks to your repertoire. The city hums differently in spring. Vendors call from doorways with candied fruits and buns. The air carries river tang and new blossoms. You imagine yourself outside breathing freely, but the brothel keeps you confined, offering only glimpses of boys skipping along streets, coins clutched tight, freedom almost sweet. Within the house, spring renews rivalries. The madam doles out robes and ornaments, tokens of favor that spark pride or envy. A boy parades a new hairpin from a wealthy patron, another stews behind forced laughter. You learn to please without provoking jealousy, to balance ambition with caution. Historians debate whether seasons shaped brothel hierarchies or if patronage alone dictated them. You know only the rhythm: winter's scarcity sharpened fear, spring's promise fuels ambition. Both demand cunning and subtlety. New patrons arrive, curious travelers from distant provinces. They order songs in strange dialects or request performances you only half know. You stumble at first but improve with each laugh and clapped hand. Slowly, you shed the role of novice, superstitions flourish. One patron demands jasmine sprigs in robes to attract fortune, another insists on poems with every word beginning the same character. You obey, weaving verses sometimes nonsensical, sometimes sharp, until he laughs at either wit or persistence. Among the boys, camaraderie softens. The cold's edge of rivalry gives way to teasing, storytelling contests, whispered riddles, even secret dances. Survival remains the core, but laughter and play now slip into the mix, signs of growing agency. Yet dangers persist. Patrons still turn ill or violent with wine, rivalries flare, and the madam's eyes never waver. Your position remains precarious. One misstep could undo every lesson winter taught. Still, spring's promise endures. You savor small freedoms, stepping outside briefly with trays of tea, glimpsing cherry blossoms in the courtyard, feeling warmth seep into your bones when no one watches. These minor joys accumulate, proof that even in confinement, life offers pockets of wonder. Spring, you realize, is also a teacher. It teaches resilience alongside hope, patience alongside ambition, reminding you that even in a house of hierarchy and illusion, fleeting moments can still belong to you. Summer arrives with relentless heat, pressing against your skin like a wet cloth, sticky and unyielding. The air inside the brothel is thick with perspiration, the scent of rice, incense, and human bodies mingling into a heady haze. The wooden floors have warped slightly, creaking under every step, and the paper screens flutter with the slightest draft. You trudge through your routines, each movement deliberate, careful not to let fatigue or irritation show. The patrons, less restrained by winter's cold, arrive in greater numbers. Merchants bring their families along, minor officials wander in on evening rounds, and travelers from distant provinces appear, curious to witness the famed performances of your house. Their expectations are high, their attention fleeting, but their coins are heavy, and survival demands compliance, performance, and charm. Rivalries sharpen under the oppressive heat. Boys jostle for positions near cool stone floors or closer to the river breeze, competing for patrons' favor with every gesture, laugh, and song. Older boys assert dominance more aggressively, and you navigate this terrain cautiously, offering charm in moderation, bowing at the right times, laughing when necessary, retreating when threatened. The hierarchy is as rigid as ever, yet subtly shifted by who can endure the heat best or manage the patron's whims with poise. Historians still debate whether seasonal patterns significantly influence patronage or performance quality. But the rhythm of summer is unmistakable, energy spent must be carefully rationed, rivalries managed with tact, and every coin earned is more precious under the relentless sun. You feel these lessons acutely, each day a test of physical stamina, mental dexterity, and emotional restraint. Quirky adaptations emerge to cope with the sweltering days. Boys fan patrons with carved bamboo fans, sing shorter arias, and improvise games to pass the long afternoons. Someone invents a ritual of sprinkling a few drops of cool tea on their wrists to feel relief, while another claims the coolness will attract wealth. You participate with the practiced grace you have honed over years, smiling even when sweat drips into your eyes. Summer is also a season of fleeting intimacy and subtle alliances. Boys cluster near cool patches, sharing whispered secrets and small gestures of care, passing water, stealing an extra bite of fruit, or gently adjusting a tangle in another's hair. You realize that the bonds forged in winter and nurtured in spring have matured, now providing both emotional support and tactical advantage in navigating the madam's watchful eye and the patron's caprices. Yet, danger is never far. Heat brings illness, fevers spike, dehydration looms, and the risk of collapse is real. Patrons, drunk on wine or too familiar with their power, may demand more than you can safely provide. Rivalries, though softened by friendship, still carry the threat of sabotage or humiliation. Every step, every word, every smile is a negotiation between survival and exhaustion. Still, summer offers lessons of endurance unlike any other season. You learn to pace yourself, to read subtle cues from patrons and fellow boys, to anticipate rivalries and soften their edges. The sweltering days teach you restraint, strategy, and the value of small victories, a smile earned. A favor granted, a moment of genuine laughter between performances. As the sun sets, dripping its last heat into the evening, you lie back on your mat, listening to the distant sounds of the city winding down. The lessons of winter, spring, and summer converge. Survival requires cunning, alliances, performance, and resilience. And you, a boy once new and trembling, now understand the rhythms of this world, the hierarchies, the illnesses, the rivalries, the fleeting joys, and carry them all in your mind, a fragile map of endurance and adaptation. The city's hum softens at night, and the brothel, once a stage of rivalry, sickness, and relentless performance, grows quieter. You lie on your mat, muscles heavy with exhaustion, listening to the soft creaks of the wooden beams and the distant murmur of late travelers on the streets. Each breath feels slower, deeper, carrying away the day's anxieties. Outside, the air is warmer now, touched with the gentle scent of jasmine or rice fields from afar. You imagine the streets, empty and peaceful, the lanterns dimmed, the river reflecting the moon like liquid silver. In these moments, the intensity of the day's survival melts into something calmer, almost serene. Even the memory of rivalries, illnesses, and forced performances softens, becoming part of a distant landscape you observe rather than inhabit. You remember fleeting acts of kindness, the hand pressed briefly against yours, the shared scraps of rice, the whispered jokes that defied the madam's watchful eyes. These small gestures ripple in your mind, warming the cold edges of memory. They are proof that even in confinement, life offers threads of connection, moments of tenderness, and glimmers of joy. Perhaps you even imagine yourself walking out of the brothel one morning, the city stretching before you, sunlight falling across rooftops, a gentle breeze in your hair. You know it is only a dream tonight, but the thought carries a quiet reassurance. Endurance has a rhythm, and you have learned it. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let yourself drift. Your body rests, your mind settles, and the world softens around you. The lessons of winter, spring, and summer linger, but they do not weigh you down. They become part of the gentle cadence of sleep, a lullaby of resilience and subtle triumphs. Breathe slowly, feel the warmth of your mat, and let your thoughts float like lanterns on water. You have survived another day in this strange, demanding world, and that in itself is something remarkable. Let the quiet fold around you, soft and unhurried, carrying you gently into the night.